Welcome back to the Right Squad, where we will ring your bells all night. And that's what President Trump did this morning from the Oval Office, a first in history, ringing the opening bell for trading on the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. The occasion was the debut of so-called Trump accounts intended for children to invest in stock market indexes. With inflation running higher than at the beginning of Mr. Trump's term and Americans' confidence in his handling of the economy almost 25 points underwater on average, and those midterm elections 4 months away, the president often cites the stock market as a mark of the country's economic health. And how is that playing, Alex?
Well, I mean, all I hear about is gas prices, as Voldy kind of referenced earlier. So I think as long as people feel it at home, they're confident. One of the things he also talked about, though, he has attacked, and maybe Mercy can get a little bit more into this, having worked in his messaging department, is he's really able to kind of breathe confidence into the economy in different aspects. And so today's press conference talked a lot about the Trump accounts, but he took questions. And one thing he hit on, which I found really interesting, was cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. He really talked about that. And I think it'll be interesting to watch, now what happens there. If it goes, like Bitcoin, for example, goes back up after kind of having the ringing endorsement from the president today during those comments. So, we'll see.
I guess he's made so much money from crypto, so of course he wants to talk it up. What I think is kind of interesting is that you talked about the stock market, and last year he didn't brag as much about the stock market because it was taking so many different falls because of all the tariffs that he was announcing. Now, in the last few months, 6 months, he has kind of stopped doing all of those tariff threats. Oh, I'm going to give 50% tariffs if they don't do X, Y, Z. And so he can see that the stock market is a powerful thing, that you can't just announce these tariffs, that it's like a sandbox, that there are real world consequences to his actions.
I think we've seen some reporting even in the New York Times recently to the effect that the tariff program never produced the kind of shocks to the global economy that were predicted. Mercy, I think to Alex Swoyer's point, when the president does these themed events, let's say on the economy, as this one was intended, and then he takes questions from reporters, he ends up he places himself really at the mercy of the reporters in terms of what the subject matter is going to be, and then the editors back in the various bureaus as to what's going to be repeated, what's going to be excerpted. Mm-hmm. And so here we had him talking at length where he should have been talking about Trump accounts and the welfare of America's children, our neediest and most vulnerable people in society. Then he found himself talking about whether or not he called the head of FIFA to get our star striker, out of the penalty box. If you're Susie Wiles, do you want him taking questions at all these things?
Yes, you do, because this is accessibility. This is what the press is looking for, and you're getting the answers. Direct transparency, as opposed to what we saw with Joe Biden, who would literally almost fall off the stage. But I gotta say, I do love the Trump accounts. I think this is just genius. It's out of the box thinking. This is basically going to be our children, American children, investing in our economy, and both are benefiting. I mean, it is just, I think, one of the biggest legacies that the president will have. And it also teaches children, like, you're investing in America, in the greatest country, and you're part of this. And it starts by not only the government, giving the $1,000, but also so many corporations that are donating, matching the donations.
Dell,
I think
Mr.
this
Dell
is
was in the Oval there.
Exactly, public-private partnerships. So, again, I think for the president, he likes the challenge from the reporters. The reporters should not be afraid, as they sometimes are.
My favorite moment from this was reporters overheard some of the young kids whispering to each other, saying, "Is this event almost over? When can we get out of here?" And so that was a pretty priceless moment. They
wanted the White House M&Ms.
Matthew, the name of the thing is the Trump accounts, and we know from whence that comes or cometh. But my question to you is that smart marketing? Should it have been called Freedom Accounts or something else?
Look, Trump likes putting his name on things, so I think that, but it's actually one of the longest term visions of his presidency, because this will be in effect, and it's actually a counter to the push for socialism, and I've been covering these since Nicki Minaj helped kick it off earlier this year or last year, because every child who has a Trump account will now have their financial future, in small part at least, directly tied to the American economy. So not only is this good financial policy, it's also a good little ideological nudge. Hey, the next time you and your friends want to go burn down an Apple store, maybe you will realize that there are direct financial consequences to that action.
Information, truth, is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.